Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. When we first looked at Gen 13 on this show, it was with contemporaries in the Marvel team Generation X. A little later, they met with Superman, whom they initially treated as a relic of a past era. Today, they encounter a hero that's somewhere in between that age gap, as I'm taking issue with Spider-Man Gen 13, written by Peter David, with art by Stuart Amundsen, Joe Rosas, Cam Smith, and Andrew Papoy. Let's see if this comic makes us want to turn the page, or turn our heads. The cover sees our stars all suited up, looking like they're charging out of a pink wormhole. Into the Barbieverse! One weird thing is that the title has a dotted outline, like they wanted the readers to clip out the letters. It's pretty stylistically different for both franchises. We begin with a band playing while Spidey gets the webs beat out of him, trying to convince himself this must be a dream, until he gets kicked in the spider crotch. He has the proportional strength of a spider, but what if he also has the proportional sensitivity? Like, imagine all the arachnids it would take to make one Peter Parker, and they all got man-checked at the same time. Is that what he's feeling right now? Meanwhile, Gen 13, minus one teammate, is attending the aforementioned concert, and most of them are enjoying it. Roxy, aka Freefall, is so excited having seats so close. However, Grunge managed to get them, and he turns it into something creepy in how she can thank him. I got a whole book on it with tons of instructions. For the last time, I am not helping you build IKEA furniture again. Rainmaker is the odd super out, not particularly enjoying black lung disease, nor the nearby patrons who refuse to put out their cigarettes, and brush her off, so she creates a localized rainstorm with lightning that I guess is purely for show, since it manages to not zap anybody.
Not scientifically possible!
When told their friend isn't having fun, Roxy shows how little she cares, considering it's Sarah's problem if she's not digging the night out. Who wouldn't have a good time at a gig like this? Oh, I don't know. Maybe anyone with a shred of taste in music? Spidey's attacker, a costumed woman, isn't answering demands for who she is or why she's after him. She throws a device, which Peter could have anticipated if his spider sense wasn't on the fritz, but he can still web it up before it explodes. Though it seems his opponent is unfazed by this maneuver. Even webbing her doesn't work, as she generates energy blades that cut right through. I find it odd that Peter's narration calls it a sword when it looks more like a dagger, but hey, maybe it's because he's still disoriented from her first attack before the story began. He falls over, at least able to put some distance between him and the enemy, maybe forgetting that he's falling toward a crowd of bystanders, but then notices he's begun to float into the arms of a rather surprised Roxy. I think that brownie those roadies offered me is beginning to kick in. It, can't be you. Oh, good. If I'm not me, that means someone else has an even more screwed up life than I do. Yes, but you're still the one who sells his marriage to a hot supermodel to the devil, so don't go celebrating just yet. The woman lands on stage, seeming to think there's a hiccup in her plan, twirls her cape, and vanishes, leaving it behind. And the crowd just figures it's part of the show. Spidey web swings away after a subpar exit line, not even thanking Roxy for saving him. An excited Grunge figures the spider dude didn't realize who softened his fall, and insists they go meet him, trying to make their way past security to get backstage. But they're denied not being on the list, and the stage manager might have been a tad racist mistaking Grunge's last name. Could have been an innocent mistake, but we're supposed to dislike him after all. Fairchild says it's not really their business and they should get going, and the muscular bouncer says she gets it, and thinks it's a good idea to grab her buns of steel. After she seems to age 20 years in between panels, she lifts the jerk up with one hand, and off-panel, according to Roxy, managing to literally put the guy's foot in his own mouth. It would only be difficult if we assume the foot is still attached to the rest of him. This manages to get them inside, as Spidey is crawling around, hearing cops nearby, though not sure who called them since he didn't really do anything. Although I was selling bootleg band merchandise before the fight broke out, I guess someone finally noticed those shirts read Bluck Lang Disease. He reflects on what brought him to L.A., a dream assignment following the band for the Daily Bugle. Though his flight arrived late, the hotel lost his reservation, and the traffic was so heavy, the taxi was pretty pointless, so he decided to web-swing the rest of the way. But just as he arrived, his spidey sense alerted him to the mysterious woman, who then threw a strange object at him. He tried to evade, but it still went off, and his head was filled with white noise, blinding his trademark precognition, and looking to have had more of an effect than the woman expected. "I figured you'd dance around like Michigan J. Frog, but you get what you get." Everything is still spinning for him as he's fired upon, and he falls from the scaffolding, police officers ordering him not to move. But since they never gave him a warning before opening fire, Spidey figures they're not real cops. They're struck by intense winds, and though the webhead immediately thinks of a certain ex-woman, it's actually Rainmaker, called by one of the phony cops as one of them, as he opens fire. Grunge takes the bullets as Fairchild tackles the shooter through a facade onto the stage, in front of the audience.
How awkward.
She declares black lung disease rules and she has to go. But the band starts playing again, despite a random stranger appearing from nowhere, and she's referred to as a mega babe, so maybe that's why they're comfortable sandwiching her between them. Apparently too starstruck, she decides to stay a bit longer, as Rainmaker tells her to be a distraction so the others can amscray. Caitlin decides to leave the superhero life behind and travel with the punk band, because nothing bad ever happened on a tour bus, right? Not sure how Grunge's powers work. I think he alters his body to whatever he's in contact with, like, say, the Absorbing Man, but he spits up the bullets he took as Spidey asks if these strangers are mutants. Sarah prevents Grunge from clarifying the nature of their powers and goes with the woozy arachnid supposition. But before they can get to the exit, Spidey decides to take a sudden nap. Not feeling right just leaving him behind, Roxy suggests taking him back to their place, to which Rainmaker gives a firm no. Anyway, they arrive home with the webhead in tow, much to the irritation of Bobby, aka Burnout. A recitation of the 70s Spidey theme song notwithstanding, Bobby doesn't like that they brought back someone they know nothing about, and is often reportedly connected to one crime or another.
The police! Get them!
Aw, Burnout, he's Spidey! He's like the 9-inch nails of super guys! In that he can be kind of angsty, moody, and with all those clones of him running around, he could actually start a rock band. He's like the 9-inch nails of super guys! Spider-Man also wrote and performed an emotionally resonant song, only for it to be outdone in popularity by the Johnny Cash cover. Kinda wonder who she thinks the black lung disease of supers would be. Young Robert's determination to be the mature one is upended by Rainmaker, giving a wink and seductively licking her lips, causing him to literally heat up a little before agreeing to let the wall crawler stay. Despite having opposed the idea herself, Sarah eventually relented to Roxy, who was like a force of nature on the matter. That and Rainmaker didn't want Bobby being more strong-willed. Maybe there's something about their relationship I'm not privy to, not reading their ongoing, but doesn't Flameboy know Rainmaker's not into dudes? Though I suppose if she's conventionally attractive enough, that doesn't matter. Also, I kind of find it odd how Freefall's eye sparkles like this. Not sure what it means, if anything, or maybe it's just an affectation from anime or something. Their mentor Lynch enters the room, kind of awkwardly calling them people a couple of times, and saying he's headed out overnight for a weaponry and surveillance equipment convention. He's really hoping his rocket launcher costume wins him this year's cosplay contest. He can sense some tension in his charges, but he doesn't bother looking directly up to see Roxy holding Spider-Man to the ceiling, so heads for the door, just as Fairchild returns, her regular clothes shredded and barely concealed by a band jacket. And Lynch is fine not knowing why. If this team's crossover with Superman is accurate, then I guess it's not uncommon for Caitlin's clothes to get torn. So maybe, between that frequency and her super strength, it kind of makes sense for it to be brushed off like this. But Lynch's lack of concern is still a little unsettling. He takes off, and she explains to her friends that the fans mistook her for part of the band, and they got overexcited when she tried to leave. She didn't get into some big fight with a supervillain, no! She was mobbed by a bunch of horny music fans. Guess that's so much better, huh? The next morning, a girl named Alyssa is waking up her mom, Heather, wondering if she's still going to school. Apparently oversleeping, the woman jumps out of bed and speeds her daughter to school with a quick and totally healthy apple Pop-Tart breakfast on the way. After dropping her girl off, Mama spots someone taking photos, a private eye hired by her ex-husband, whom she tells off. In response, he reminds her she has a court date this morning. Wow, when you barf on a Starbucks barista in this town, word really gets around. Back at the Gen13 hideout, their maid Anna, who's basically an android, is surprised by Spider-Man, who asks her name and their location. And he also seems to be grabbing her arm, which feels rather aggressive for Parker, but I guess considering recent events, it's kind of understandable. Not like he can tell if he's a prisoner or not. Her answer is to throw him down the stairs and press her attack. He makes his way to the kitchen, where Burnout tries to stop him by shooting fire at the guy.
Son, you are dumber than a bowl of mice.
This just works to ignite his web pack, so he dives into the nearby pool to douse it. Then comes face to face with a skinny-dipping rainmaker. To quote the webcomic Sluggy Freelance, "Game called on account of naked chick." A surveillance van has lost the signal of a tracker planted on Spidey, but since they were so close, they can send the coordinates to Glider to take care of the rest. And that tracker happens to be that huge toenail-shaped boomerang-looking thing at the bottom of the pool. Not exactly the most stealthy device, is it, folks? Is that why they had to make him all woozy so he wouldn't notice the thing stuck to his backpack? We jump to a courtroom where Alyssa's dad, Paul, is trying to get sole custody based on Heather's unfitness, with erratic hours and unavailability, which is explained as her trying to make a living despite the father's lack of support. The judge has each side's brief and will be ruling shortly, but Heather wants to add her assertion that her ex-husband wants to get back at her and doesn't really care about Alyssa. She suddenly pauses, as if in pain, and is contacted about the general location of her targets from the men in the van. She brushes her spell off as working too late, and the judge tells her to be more rested as he adjourns court. Paul gives a backhanded compliment as he and his lawyer leave, and now alone with her own attorney, it's revealed she has split personalities. Heather, struggling divorcee, didn't know about the comm device in her ear, so Glider took over.
Here she comes to wreck the day!
She tells her lawyer, Mr. Cohn, to contact her client about Gen13 and their imminent capture, or disposal, and to make sure Paul doesn't get custody of Alyssa, or she swears she'll kill her ex-husband. Can you believe Judge Judy passed on this case? Cohn points out that Heather doesn't know Glider even exists, and either way wouldn't want her ex taken out like that. Also, apparently, cold-blooded murder isn't really her style. Glider says styles change as she disappears, leaving behind the coat she just put on.
Well, that was pointless.
After one panel of Alyssa being distracted in class, and another that's just a photo of a coastal city, something that some comics did around this time, personally I think it can kind of break immersion, tensions have settled as Grunge has summed up how he and his teammates escaped a facility and have been hiding out in La Jolla. He goes on with how highly he thinks of Spidey, having tracked his career since he was a kid. Since you were a kid? Quiet! If Joe Quesada hears you, he'll make Spidey sell another loved one to the devil so he can appear younger. You're like my inspiration! Oh, don't put that on him. Parker's got enough to feel guilty about, thank you very much. Roxy calls him the grand old man of super guys, which makes the web spinner feel, well, old, and he suggests the kiddos are better off not knowing what he's really about, a far cry from being a trip. Rainmaker follows him through the house, insisting her friends didn't mean to offend him. I'm not offended. I'm just not used to being looked up to by Gen Xers, I guess. Oh no, we're not on that team. We just met them a couple of times is all. Sarah says that despite how the media portrays people her age, they've always been confident in their identities, like Spidey. But he notes that's not saying much. He's about to leave just to find out he's not as 100% back to normal as he thought, as his spider sense didn't alert him to Glider and a squad of armed goons outside. Is it just me, or are Jehovah's Witnesses getting more aggressive these days? We go to Mr. Cohn's office, where he's on the phone telling a Mr. Bartlett that the squad, handpicked and led by Bartlett Jr., will successfully work with Glider to confront Gen13, who apparently made the younger Bartlett look bad when they first escaped, and he was subsequently fired. It's exposition disguised as a kind of clunky, one-sided conversation, hoping to quickly clue readers in if they're not overly familiar with Gen 13. Speaking of, Caitlin has pulled up a database on Glider, a freelancer that's worked on both sides of the law and can appear anywhere at any time.
I thought insurance salesmen were pushy.
More goons bust into the house at different points, opening fire as Grunge calls for everyone to vamoose before their cover's blown. Rainmaker generates a powerful wind to force the invaders out, including Glider, whose name I guess Cat told Grunge in between panels and evading enemy fire as he attempts to clock her in the middle of the maelstrom. But she vanishes before he can connect, because she's not a total idiot. Burnout and Freefall deal with the goons outside, only for the pyrokinetic to be doused in fire-retardant foam, and Roxy to be sucker-punched from behind by Glider. Spidey intervenes, telling her to keep things between the two of them, but the masked woman reveals it was never about the wall crawler. He's just a means to an end, namely the teenage targets. It was a genius plan. Wait until Spider-Man happened to be across the country from his usual stomping grounds and attack him when he passes by somewhere most of their targets happen to be. Score 1 for Operation Massive Coincidence! Super strength notwithstanding, Caitlin's backup doesn't turn the tables very much when Glider throws her at Spider-Man. And hey, remember a few pages back when we got all that backstory about the client's son losing his job because of Gen 13? Well, he's trained his weapon on Roxy for some payback. But fortunately Grunge turned himself into concrete and hurls the chump safely away. It almost makes him less annoying. As Cat starts breaking Bobby free of the now solidified foam, Rainmaker fires some lightning at Glider, but her energy daggers, again called swords, can conveniently absorb them. Having had enough, she tosses an explosive that knocks Sarah down. The webhead comes in with another assist, getting a few good hits on the assassin. I'm the means, all right, but it's your end! Boo! Come on, Parker, you can do better than that. Though I'd also like to think he'd be above what very much looks like a kick to someone's crotch, especially if it's supposed to be payback for earlier. I'm not sure where Gen 13's place is supposed to be in relation to local establishments, but the fight is apparently spilled far out enough that local school kids stop their recess to look at the super fight happening nearby. Suddenly, Spidey starts narrating as he tries distracting Glider so Concrete Grunge can attack from her 6 o'clock. But she still saw him coming, slicing his arm off with her blade and vanishing. That had less to do with her job of hunting Gen 13 and more to do with her lesser-known hatred of living statue performers. Even though the goons have busted through the schoolyard fence and the children are running in a panic, the web spinner stays by the young hero as he painfully fuses his arm back. Glider appears again, ready to strike, until someone shouts from off-panel, "Okay, freeze!" Someone's playing a Batman villain guessing game, and they don't seem to be winning. No, it's young Bartlett, aiming his rifle at a group of kids and threatening to waste them all if he gets so much as a hint of any powers being used on him. All this commotion going on for so long, and not a single school faculty member has come to check on the kids? He tells Spidey and Grunge to join the others, using what is likely an anti-Asian slur on the latter, because otherwise how can we be sure how evil this nozzle is? One of the kids, namely the girl in the green shirt, happens to be Alyssa, and as the goons are about to fire on the heroes, Glider says that threatening children isn't what they do. Bartlett says it's his operation, his men, so the lady can hightail it now that her job is done. She demands he turn his weapon away from the kids, and he responds with a do what I want, when I want, to whoever I want, smacking Alyssa with the barrel of his gun.
Urge to kill rising.
Spidey narrates having heard Glider mutter a name, or maybe hissing, before disappearing again. At the enemy's mercy, Grunge asks Spidey what to do. We duck and pray. Great plan. I can see how you got to be a living legend. Hey, he's living, ain't he? For the next couple of seconds, anyway. Before Bartlett can follow his ready aim with the standard fire, Glider suddenly appears with a rifle of her own, easily cutting down the goons without hesitation or mercy. When the Nepo Baby Call of Duty reject aims his weapon at her, Spidey webs his gun away and prays Glider won't take advantage. But she fires anyway. My prayer's answered. And the answer is fat chance. Maybe you shouldn't have added, no whammy, stop, like you are on Press Your Luck. As Burnout and Fairchild tend to the children, Alyssa cries out for her dad, and Spidey can see that makes Glider look like she's been stabbed in the heart. Either that or the shrimp cocktail she got at the gas station is coming back to haunt her. His spider sense returns, too late to do anything about Bartlett using his dying moments to fire on Glider. As she falls over, Rainmaker asks if they help her, which Spidey says, yeah, helping anyone that needs help is what they do. But as he pulls her cape, she's already vanished. Glider was a Jedi the whole time? Was turning on the goon squad for her like throwing Palpatine down the hole was for Darth Vader? Is she going to return as a Force ghost now? Sometime later, Lynch has returned, his pupils telling him all has been peaceful, and he calls their attention to the Daily Bugle's headline, Major Battle in La Jolla, accompanied by a photo by Peter Parker, whom Grunge wants to get his hands on. However, that's the only picture that happened to come out properly, one where you can't see the faces of GEN13 or Glider, so Pete narrates on his flight back to Manhattan. It suggests that he made sure to protect his new allies by omitting any other pics from the scene. As for the assassin who had a change of heart, Heather Height is comatose, explained by Mr. Cohn as a possible drive-by shooting. It's not known when or how she'll wake up, so between this and the attack on Alyssa's school, Paul decides her daughter would be safer in the country. Specifically, Bulgaria. Wanting to be kept informed on any change, Paul leaves with Alyssa, promising to take care of her because that's what parents are for, doing whatever they can for their kids. And the comic ends on Heather shedding a tear. That was Spider-Man GEN13. I hesitate to call it bad, but it definitely felt a bit unfocused. As the title Cross Generations suggests, the story has themes of older and new generations in different ways, but I don't feel it really leans that far into them. The most apparent one is two divorced parents quarreling over their child. We get a bit of dynamic between Heather and Alyssa that her secret life has left her fatigued, forgetful, and maybe taking shortcuts like Pop-Tarts on the go for breakfast. Outside her allegations in court of Paul wanting revenge, and him seeming just a bit snide when he accused her of putting up an act, we don't get that Mr. Height is actually a bad father. At the end, he isn't celebrating his ex-wife's condition, and seems to genuinely want his kid to be safe, which we can't fault him for. Despite Glider being protective of the girl as well, the whole split personality thing didn't seem to matter much to the story. Most of the time we see the evil side making the calls, and there's no indication that Heather took over when Alyssa was threatened. They could have changed it that she's an overworked freelance superhuman that was also a protective mom, and it really wouldn't change anything about the story. I actually checked to see if this was a pre-existing villain for GEN13 or something, but no, Glider was created for and only appeared in this one book. I like her design well enough. Her mask kind of reminds me of Nightwing's, and she must go through a lot of capes if she can't take them with her for those dramatic exits. I think there are moments where you can really feel for Alyssa, even relate to her being confused about whether or not she's going to school because her mom is still sleeping, because plenty of parents can have legit reasons for sleeping in, and certainly concerned when she gets threatened. The book doesn't really give us much to go on for why she would prefer her dad for comfort after the ordeal. Well, you can make the argument that Glider finally realized that it was in her daughter's best interest for Paul to have custody, and if she weren't shot, she may have decided to let that happen legally. It doesn't build up to that very well. The ending feels like it wants to pluck even more heartstrings at the last second.
My emotions! My emotions!
A different approach to the generational theme was Spider-Man, the seasoned superhero, being admired by relative newcomers. Makes sense that a guy so often looked down on, demonized, scapegoated, taken aback to being so praised, but that's not played up very well either. The only ones who seem excited to have him around are Roxy and Grunge. Burnout was worried about the security risk he posed, and Rainmaker and Fairchild seemed more ambivalent than anything else. The crossover with Superman handled the whole difference in generations a lot better, seeing as how most of the team really didn't think much of Supes, and were more or less put in their place as the story progressed. And also, unlike that crossover, aside from a couple of quips and a very in-character appeal to help even the enemy, Parker doesn't offer much in the way of wisdom or guidance, not by word and not much by action. He and this team of younger heroes just happen to meet each other and team up. I guess that phone call to the elder Bartlett was another example of older generations and how they want to do what they think is best for the newer, even though it thematically tied closer to the Height family drama, and I can't exactly say it intrigued me. Maybe Peter David really wanted the reader to really want this wannabe soldier dead. He's not the first villain to threaten kids, but this felt like an almost extreme degree that he even attacks a child for revenge, which I also guess was to push Glider to turn on him, even though we only get one mention of what she's typically willing or not willing to do. Like the Freelancer, both the Bartletts are strictly for this story, and pretty underdeveloped. A lot like their whole plan. They say Spider-Man was a means to an end to get to Gen13, but why though? Why did they think that the New York wall crawler was going to lead them to the hideout of these meddlesome supers? It's one thing to play fast and loose as to why nobody noticed that big honkin' tracker, or how they managed to scramble Spidey sense, or Glider's very story-specific power set of teleportation and conjuring energy blades. Or they're supposed to be tech-based because they are seen inert on her belt during the windstorm. But nothing about using Spidey made much sense at all. Even if he happened to web swing at the wrong place at the wrong time, and they managed to gather around a bunch of their goons to pose as cops, what exactly indicated to Cretin Team 6 that Gen13 would take him in? Were they counting on their compassion for a fellow do-gooder, or was Spider-Man fanboy highlighted in their dossier on grunge? Dialogue felt a little odd at times, mostly when a term was repeated in what felt like an awkward fashion, like Lynch calling the team people, or Spidey referring to Bartlett Jr. as G.I. Joe. The art was mostly fine. As with the Superman crossover, characters like Fairchild, who have been noted as being highly attractive, aren't drawn as cheesecakey as I have seen in ads or pages of their main title at the time. And aside from maybe some awkward coloring once or twice, I found no real problems. Though some expressions I felt were detailed rather oddly, like an aroused Burnout looking like James Marsters as Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or Alyssa when she's threatened with the gun. She looks genuinely scared and sad, yet also kinda like her face is morphing into Tim Conway's at the same time. While there were some interesting ideas in the story, I don't think they coalesced as well as they could have. With more development and various character interactions and dynamics, combined with some genuine heart it already has, maybe that all could have helped its conclusion leave more of an impact. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.